Yeah, we're live. Let's see how much I missed it by having to redo it. Oh, 7:08. That's not too bad. It's kind of close. Kind of close-ish. Richard Holdenar, I'm here at West Tech Performance. We got lots of cool stuff going on. I hope you guys have taken a look at the video that I posted today. It seems to be doing very well. A lot of the Magnum guys are happy about getting some love, and we ran the stock exhaust manifolds, both the big and the small opening stock exhaust manifolds, compared those to the headers. And everybody is excited, not so much about the power gains or the lack thereof from all the testing, but the thing that they're most interested in, and that's why I included it, and I thought it was the coolest thing, was the changes that we saw in the air fuel and the mixture of the carburetor. And a lot of guys were confused in that. How could the exhaust change that? How does it affect the carburetor? How does it know that there's even a carburetor up there? Well, I'm going to tell you. Reflected waves are an amazing thing. That's how the exhaust works. That's how the headers work. They scavenge, and these waves that they send that helps draw induction air in and get exhaust out has an effect on the carburetor. It actually notices that, and because it's drawing that induction air in and getting the exhaust out, it has more signal to the carburetor. More signal to the carburetor means more fuel. That's why it does it. And it's as you can see, we saw gains from the headers even down low. And that's why we're seeing a more consistent signal to the carburetor, because we've gained power down low with the long tube headers. And as you saw, and this doesn't always happen. This is the reason that I put it in there, is because it's kind of lucky. It's not always like this. A lot of times the carburetors are more like they were with the stock exhaust manifolds. You see one area where it's rich and one area where it's lean. And if it's lean enough, you can't adjust it anymore in one spot, because we can't do that with a carburetor. We can't adjust it anymore without leaning out the other side of it. So it's always a trade-off. The interesting thing in the video that I'm going to put up later tonight or possibly tomorrow is a test that I did on this motor with different spacers. So we ran, and this actually was done out of necessity, and only the live feed guys are getting this information. The spacer test was actually done out of necessity, and the reason for that is that particular M1 dual plane intake manifold. We can take a walk in there and take a gander at what I'm talking about. And you guys might be able to see that. So we'll take a little stroll in there, take a walk with me. And we're walking. Look at this. Okay, here's a question for tonight. What do you guys think? This thing came out of a Dodge 600. Is a 1984 draw-through turbo and stuff. What I'm thinking about is, I did a compression test on this motor, and it seems to have compression in all the cylinders. It spins around. It seems sort of happy. Every gasket and everything is probably not great. I'm assuming that the head gasket is. What I'm wondering is, right now I have a 2.5 in the Dodge Omni GLH. What I want to do is, but it has all T2 stuff on it. So it has the revised intake manifold, the different turbo position, the intercooler. It doesn't really technically have a T2 intercooler on it, but I probably would put one in there. Right now it has a big front mount. But what I'm thinking about doing is taking that motor out, because we know that it's hurt somehow and not working. But if I take this one and take all of this stuff off and swap on all the T2 stuff and put this motor back in, fingers crossed, because I haven't run this. I don't know for sure that it's good. I'm assuming based on the compression test, and run that with all of the stuff that's in the car now, I could have a running car with that motor from the wrecking yard. So let me know what you guys think about that. And let me know if you think I should take the chance of doing that. I really don't like putting a motor in the car and going through all of that trouble to hook it up and get it running and doing all that stuff without knowing that the motor's good. I'm like that even on a crate motor. If I could buy a crate motor, I would want to run it on the dyno and make sure that it's good before I would put it in a car. Just that way you know for sure. But what I was talking about before I went off on a tangent here is this. This is a dual plane M1 Mopar performance intake manifold. And if you can see under here, right here, we have a carb spacer. And the reason that we have that, and you can see this has already been notched a little bit under here, because the throttle linkage hits. Even worse, on the other side, kind of hard to see with our radiator hose here, but if you look under there, you see a pad. the throttle linkage hits under there too. So you can't actually go to wide open throttle with that manifold and that carburetor. Maybe because it's a Mopar and they thought that you have to run a thermoquad on it or something, but we weren't able to run the Holly on there unless I had some sort of carb spacer. So putting the carb spacer on there allowed the throttle linkage to work. Walking by our Hemi, so we're going to talk a little bit about this. So I'm prepping this one. It had stock heads on it, stock Magnum intake manifold. Now it's getting Edelbrock stuff. And that is the 5.7 Hemi that I put together basically out of leftover parts that I had laying around. Naturally, when I put it together, put ring gap in it. I've already run a cam upgrade on it with the guys from Comp Cams, and their new cams for the Hemi stuff they work really well. It made good power. It's got, as I said, it's got ring gap in it. Because it's got ring gap in it, I ran a turbo on it, and it's already been boosted. It worked good, you know, despite the fact that everybody's saying, oh, Hemis have, you know, the ringlands are too small on it. They're going to break. They don't. You treat them nicely. So that one's been run, but I'm curious as to see what the new heads will do. The thing that I'm wondering about is it doesn't have a lot of camshaft in it. It probably needs more camshaft. I'm hoping that those Edelbrock RPM heads, I'm hoping that they flow more than the stock of all of the Hemi heads. And all of them are good, but there are gooder ones, like the ones that are on the late model one. What I'm hoping is that, you know, those, even though the factory heads flow fairly well, that the Edelbrock heads flow better and can support more power. And that eventually we would try to make that thing, you know, make more power with more camshaft and stuff. I'm curious to see what that intake manifold does. The Magnum intake works really well for stuff that's, you know, 62 or 6300 and lower, and it makes a lot of torque. It's really hard to beat. It's a very impressive combination. It's kind of like the Trailblazer SS of the LS world. It's really good. It's a better manifold than the 6.1 SRT8 intake manifold is, because I've compared those back to back. And a lot of guys ask me, well, how did you do that? They're different. They're different flanges. They're designed for different heads. Yeah, they are. I just bolted it on because I didn't know any better. We just did it anyway. But the Magnum intake works good because it's a longer runner deal, and it offers a lot of like average torque production. So I'm curious to see what the Edelbrock one does when we run that and compare it. I'm hoping my camera zooms back in. Just try to snap it to the dyno and get a decent tune on it. Are you talking about the 2.2? I can't run it on the dyno because the bell housing that we got, the rear wheel drive bell housing that we got on the 2.2 won't bolt to the dyno. So I'm going to have to make some sort of an adapter plate to the back of the bell housing that then bolts to the dyno, because we obviously know the front of it bolts to the motor. So it's you know, like that's what I was saying, and everybody wants to know, well, why don't you run a V8 Nissan, or why don't you run a V8 Toyota? Because it's always this stuff. It's like, okay, well, I have a rear wheel drive bell housing. I bought the bell housing, had it shipped to me, and it doesn't fit. So it didn't solve the problem. But I'm going to make it solve the problem, and that's, you know, that's always part of the fun. The early 2.2 has a different crank flange. It has a oh, the flywheel won't work. I see, but I could put a different. I could buy a flywheel for it. That's not hard. Because this is not a steel crank in this one, right? I don't know what the 2.5 is. I don't know if it's a common block or if it's an early one. Tom, don't install the engine. Make sure it's good before you do all the work. I'd like to. I really want to get that thing running, though. The Hemis did have a reputation of the valve seats falling out, their early ones, and I've been worried about this one because I know nothing about these heads. I just know that they're Hemi heads. This motor is very early. It was a very high mileage. I haven't had anything done to the heads. I haven't had the seats fixed or anything. I've just run them, and every time I've run them, I've been thinking about that. Is this the time when they come apart and ruin the whole motor? Because, you know, if a valve seat comes out, it can be really bad. Dinosaur. I don't have my Ron Cam shirt on. The oil doesn't have metal in it. It seems to be pretty good. I even found the proper freeze plugs for the side of the motor, so I can seal that up. The other issue was a water pump, but I had somebody send me one of those in the mail. The same gentleman that sent the bell housing, so I think that that's solved. But also that other motor has a water pump on it, so I was thinking about transferring stuff over. I would really like to put that in and make the motor run. The linkage hits because the cam is wrong always. Can you start the engine on the dyno cradle? You have a 2.2 bell housing and a starter from the car. You don't need to hook it up to the dyno. We could start it, I guess. Yeah, we could try that. I think I have the starter for this motor also. I think that was, when we took it out, I think that was still attached. So I think I have that starter. And it has the separator plate on it right now. I was actually thinking about that. At my house, and I wanted to see if, I wondered if the separator plate was enough to bolt the starter to, just so that it would crank it over. That's just so, it's just soda tonight. Aaron, does the Magnum do better than you expected so far? It's the interesting comparison, and I'm going to do a video on this. This will be the third one probably that I do while I'm down here, is a comparison, and then my junkyard motor, and then we can kind of get an idea on how well the junkyard motor is doing, or how much better the one of them has a really long runner kegger manifold on it. The other one has this dual plane. And if anybody, does anybody know how well this dual plane is compared to the Speedmaster piece or an Edelbrock piece? Because I've never run another Magnum dual plane on anything. What does softening of the combustion chamber do to power production? It usually increases it, because then you can run more timing, and it makes the thing less sensitive to detonation. It's done by lots of people. It's done by Pro Stock. It's done by lots of turbo guys. Is a lower LSA or higher better for boost? There's not one there's no such thing as better for boost. Pick the cam that you want to make the power curve that you want, and then add boost to that. The cams that the OEMs puts in stuff, like the LS9 cam or the LSA cam, are put in not for power. They're put in for a specific reason. They're put in for idle quality, emissions, and lots of different things that have nothing to do with making maximum power. Wish list cam for the 360 Magnum, 268, 274. Then what? I don't know. I have a cam coming that'll be here tomorrow. From somebody sent me a link to the Summit stuff, and we actually ordered one. So we ordered that next day. So that will be here, and we will put that one in. This thing, the Magnum that's on there, has valve springs in it already. The stream is breaking down. A lot of times the connection here is not good. The signal strength is not good. We'll go into a long, involved discussion on softening the chambers when I'm doing some interview stuff. What cam and heads are going to do on the Magnum? We're going to try a bunch of different stuff. We're going to try some stuff from UT Performance. We're going to try some comp stuff. We're going to we'll try a few different cams on it. Some, you know, small, medium, big kind of thing maybe. I'd like to try a couple of different heads. I haven't decided on the heads exactly yet. We're going to run a ported version of the stock one, I'm sure. Maybe another iron head. Pro Comp has an iron head, and for sure some other kind of aluminum head. Tim. Softening the chambers is like using a wire wheel to knock all the sharp edges off the chamber. It's not. It doesn't make it smooth. You're taking material off in specific areas. I bet you could pull start the 2.2. It does spin over fairly easy. Casey, is that a real thing? Do you pull start Volkswagen engines? How much RPM does 1 degree of LSA change the characteristics to produce power at a different RPM? There is no strict amount per degree. The LSA doesn't always shift the RPM. Yeah, Frank, that's part of it. You're cutting the quench at an angle. Use the Mopar Performance Purple Grind. I don't think we're going to use any of those. I don't think we have any of those. Would like to see EQ and AFR heads. Does AFR make a Mopar head? It should say Dynocologist. Chad, there's no dumb questions. If you have 2 turbos, each have 5 pounds springs, is the end result 10 pounds at the motor? Are you talking about 5-pound springs on the wastegate? If they both open up at 5 pounds, you'll only have 5 pounds of boost. Muriatic acid will soften the chamber. It'll soften the whole motor. The cam in the Magnum is a roller. The trick flow Magnum head would be good, but most of the stuff you look for now is out of stock. No, Dan, I haven't seen Calvin's manifold. Did he post something? I'll have to take a look at it. Usually I see his stuff, but I've been thrashing on this stuff a lot. Yeah, the trick flow is not specifically a Magnum head. It's also an LA head. Interference from Area 51, that's it. The one we got from Summit is a roller cam, yeah. It's a Magnum cam and not an LA cam. Or even a late LA cam, which is also a roller. Yeah, Dan, I remember the acid ported stuff. They would acid etch them and then leave them outside in the rain so they get some rust on them, so they get some ugly surface finish. Yeah, Dan's saying that on the 2.2, the only thing I'd worry about is a timing belt. I actually have a new timing belt for it, so I can change that. Have you ever dimpled the ports on like a golf ball? I have not. I've not done that. I would be curious to see if the pattern, the dimple pattern, had an effect. Yeah, Chad, it doesn't matter. If the wastegates are set to open at a given boost level, they're going to open up whether there's one of them or 2 of them. We run 2 of them on the dyno all the time. That way we have better control, but it works, you know, no matter what you're doing. .7 LS versus a 5.7 Mopar Big Bang battle. I don't know. The Hemi's already been over 1,000 horsepower. We've done that. I don't know that I've done that on an LS1. We've done it on LS2s and LS3s, but I don't think I've ever gone that far on an LS1. I had to wait 3 months for brake drums for my Cutlass. And one was cracked all the way through. The dimple depth is more important, so I have to be careful how hard I whack it. Check out cam motion for a cam for Hemi. I actually have a couple of Steve's cams here already. There's no high RPM screamers for the 2.2 or the 2.5. It really doesn't have enough cylinder head for that. I'm curious to see what the dimples do. I would think that they don't do anything. A 430, 460, 2 Lincoln V8. I've never run one of those. We had one of those on the chassis dyno, and I remember it because it's the first time I'd seen one of those motors. That's an MEL motor, right? Can you build comparable power from a Mopar at the same price point as a small block Chevy? Probably not. Although the junkyard motors are the same. So if you go get a Magnum, it's the same motor. I mean, it's the same cost as a small block Chevy is. Zoo Truck, welcome. Oh, and I told somebody I'd give him a shout out tonight. Some Dodge 2.2 guys. Chris at Turbos Unleashed. Welcome. I spoke with him today. Seems like a really good guy. He's done a lot of cool 2.2 liter turbo stuff. So I'm going to work with him. As a matter of fact, on the 2.5, I think that there's already a bunch of his stuff on that motor from the original owner. So I'm looking forward to taking that motor out and finding out what's going on with it. And hopefully, 2.2 over there, hopefully making that thing work. Yes, always be careful how hard you whack it. Dimples do not work in port. Needs to be spinning. I agree with that. I agree that the golf ball principle is a whole different thing and what it's doing compared to what airflow is doing in a port. What? As soon as I say that the 2.2s won't rev, I get somebody tell me that they do rev and they run it to 9,500. They don't really have the airflow in the head to support that, though. They're not. It's not going to work very well up there. High RPM at a 2.2 is 5,200, and on a 2.5, it's even lower than that. I mean, they're 6,000 RPM motors. A 4.853 can usually be had for 500, and the Hemi is 1,500. They're the same price in our wrecking yards if you can find both of them. I can find lots of 4.8 and 5.3s. You don't find Hemis very often, but there are some there. The last time I was there were 3 or 4 of them. How much power can the Magnum block take? I have no idea. I mean, I would think that it would be as strong as a small block Chevy, but I don't know. I mean, I don't have any problem putting boost to it. The block, I don't think, is the thing that's going to break. I think that the internals are probably going to break before the block does. Rocket, it takes a lot to spin. I'm sure it does. I would like to see what the highest flowing 2.2, 8 valve head, like a G head. What's the highest flow rate ever achieved by one of those? I gotta be able to tell David Vizard, I gotta lay down the gauntlet and say, hey, look, man, this guy's saying he gets 200 CFM. I don't know why your 170 isn't working out very well. You know, just poke him a little bit and see if he can get the numbers up there. John, my thoughts on a turbo setup for a 400 Mopar with a stroker kit in it. It works. Just pick the turbos that you want to make the power that you want, and it works on a Mopar, it works on a Chevy, Ford, it works on all of them. Dan, I think ported ones only flow 160 or so. Stock ones aren't anywhere near that, I don't think. Can you rev a 360 as high as a Mopar? Or can you rev a 340 or a 360 as high as a 340? Yeah, the RPM has nothing to do with the displacement. The RPM is always initially valve train stuff. I've seen the ringlands of Hemis come off on NA motors. You can detonate the ringlands off of anything with the wrong timing and the wrong air fuel and the wrong temperature. That's not hard. Show swap the Omni. That's not hard. It's really easy to do, but it's not because of the ringland problem. We've run 4-digit power levels with the stock ringlands, with ring gap and the right tune and the right temperature and all that. So we know you can do that. It's not, so if somebody broke it on an NA motor, they did it because they detonated the heck out of it. And I'm okay, Rocket. I'm okay with the thing making torque. I was just talking to Chris about this today. Even if I had a stock 2.2 that was only running, you know, I'll say 7 pounds, but it would have to be at least 10. If it was just, I just want one that goes and drives around and makes boost. I can worry about making it more than that later on. I just want to have the Omni GLH running and making boost. I don't care about having a 500 or 400 or really even a 300 horsepower one. A 200 horsepower one would just be awesome. I remember how much fun my Turbo Focus was, and it was only making, I don't know, 220 or 230 at the tire with the turbo on it at lower boost. And it was fantastic to drive around. It was awesome. The little Sprint Turbo, you know, never made more than 110 at the tire. Normally it was 70 or 80 at the tire the way I was driving around. Piston velocity gets higher with more stroke. That doesn't make any difference in the RPM ranges that we're talking about. Yeah, 16 spark plugs. That's the one thing I don't like about the Hemi is having to buy so many spark plugs. As a matter of fact, if you look at the factory heads that came off of this one that I'm prepping, you'll see that it still has factory plugs in it, the ones that came from the wrecking yard, because I didn't want to go buy new plugs for it. And I even ran boost on whatever those factory plugs were. I think I did bring the ring gap down though, or the plug gap down. Nicholas, I think guys that are building race versions of those motors probably pick the LA one. Your 7M made 100 more foot-pounds of torque than horsepower. That means it's mild. It needs more camshaft or more head flow or a shorter runner. "15 spark plugs is a fix for the bad chamber design." '88 Shelby Z, blast at 225 wheel horsepower, 291 foot-pounds. See, that's the thing. It's making a lot more torque than horsepower, and that kind of shows you how these things, you know, which direction that they lean. Bolt-on 2.2, that's good. So what do you guys think? If I run some cams in the Magnum, cams that are NA cams that have, like, for instance, really tight LSAs on them, how do you guys think that will work under boost? Watch out for too much piston speed. How comfortable would you feel with a 200 shot on a stock 5.7 with ring gap in E85? Which 5.7 are you talking about? Are you talking about a Hemi or are you talking about a 5.7 LS? My dad had a Chevy Sprint Turbo. They are small. That's why I like them. We are doing, Evan, we are going to do the kegger manifold upgrade. Somebody else is doing it. The guys from UT Performance are going to send one that we can test. How about an EXP GT with a 300 straight 6? I don't know what that is. And the turbo that's on the 2.5 that's in the Omni is much bigger than the stock one. I say much bigger. It's bigger than the stock one, so it will make more power than a stock turbo will. The 2.2 needs to get back on the road and needs to run the stock wheels. That's what everyone said. Almost everyone said you need to run the stock wheels on it. What are the specs on the cam I ordered from Summit? I don't know. Let's see here. Let me see here. Push rods. It was a 2745-9, so whatever that part number is. Turbo, you need a wide LSA for a turbo setup with high exhaust to intake pressure ratio. If you build a low turbine to compressor ratio, the cam will be more like an NA cam. So if you have a small responsive turbo, you want a wider LSA, that's what you're saying? (11/16) race cam, yeah, that would be good. And the reason that I want to test that, the reason I want to test the cams is because there are a lot of people out there that think that it won't work. They think that, oh, it's just going to bleed all of the boost out of the intake, despite the fact that when you tell them that the back pressure is higher than the boost pressure, so the low pressure is not going to bleed out to the high pressure area. That's not really a thing. And then when you tell them that, they're like, oh, yeah, that's right. It doesn't do that. Put a stock illuminator cam in. Those are pretty sporty. I don't know exactly what turbo is on the 2.5 right now. I'm going to have to take the motor out, and so I can get a look at it and see what the specs are on it. Zoo truck, a stock Gen 2 LT1, stock S-cast heads, carb swap, 554 horsepower and 860 foot-pounds. That sounds like, those two numbers sound like you're either hitting the nitrous very, very early, or this is an automatic car. Exhaust gas is getting into the intake, cause detonation. See, that's Dan, right? Oh no, that's Turbo 32, who also knows about turbo stuff. That's the direction that it would go. The high pressure stuff is going to go toward the lower pressure stuff. And getting dilution from the exhaust side is also not a good idea. Oh, so the 2.2 445 head flows 160 CFM stock? Well, then it should be able to flow 200 without any problem, right? Once you port it. So, Dean, the SVO turbo head flowed 236 when it was ported. That seems right. Charles, your first car was a 69 Nova with a 230 inline 6 and a 2-speed power glide. That must have been really sporty. What rear gears did it have in it? Exhaust lobe timing delayed to feed the turbo. My contention is that whatever cam we put in there and it makes an NA power output, when we add a turbo to that, it's just going to have more of that same curve. Oh, a 273 gear. Wow, that thing must have taken a little while to get up to speed. Although if it would get up to a fairly fast speed, I would imagine in first gear, 75 in first is a lot. When you add ring gap to the junkyard builds, do you grind the used ones off the engine, replace rings with OEM and gap, or aftermarket rings? I use what's there and grind them and put them back on. I just use the stock ones. There's cheap T6 turbos going on eBay. Are they like the Summit one? Heavy SRT. So I'm about to set an NA record soon. First 650 horsepower, 411 Hemi in a WK2. Cool. I don't know what all that means, but rotary. In a situation where a single plane intake manifold is the only option, can a difference in cam timing and or duration add the available low end torque? You can crutch the single plane a little bit with obviously a mild cam, and that the mild cam will try to help make a little bit more low speed power than the bigger cam will, which will be even softer down low. One of the things that works fairly well with a single plane intake is variable cam. But ultimately, the single plane intake is not going to be, because of its runner length, is only going to be most effective at higher engine speeds. What's it take to get one of those Omnis to 500, 600? It takes all the normal stuff. It takes a ported head. It takes cam. It takes a short runner custom intake. Most of those guys that are up in that power level, it takes a good intercooler, and it takes a lot of boost. It takes a whole bunch because the NA motor's not really making very much power. And so to get there, you have to multiply that number by a lot. How to tell if the HEI distributor is locked out? Just take the cap off, grab the rotor, hold the distributor in place, and spin the rotor. If the rotor moves back and forth, then it's not locked. If the rotor won't move, then it is locked. .200 CFM is good for a non-crossflow RS11. Carrie, if I get a 6.1, can you things and stuff to make more power? I don't know what the question is. White LX 30 to 35 PSI. To make 600, yeah, I would think it would be that. Oh, WK2 is a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Yeah, I've seen James's stuff. 9-second Omni. That's pretty sporty. The nice thing about those cars is they're very light. Just lift up the hood and watch how it bends and buckles when you lift it up. They're really light. I like that though. That's why I like the Sprint, and that's why I like the early Civic. Dan, I don't know if you can use that 6.6 crank. Maybe it is a drop-in. I've never seen them compared side by side. Yep, Tom, it should double the boost. I mean, it should double the NA power output. I mean, I think that there's a limit to that, obviously. I'm not telling you that you can run whatever cam you want in your turbo motor. I'm just saying for what most of the people that are talking about here is, and as soon as I say that, somebody jumps in about Formula One or Pro Stock or something like that. But for most of the people that are doing things like putting heads cam and intake on there, if they put a camshaft in there, like especially the LS stuff, any camshaft that you put in there, it doesn't matter what it is, for an LS, any kind of the stage 1, 2, 3 available shelf cams, and I don't, a lot of guys, oh, I got a custom cam on mine. You got a custom cam on your LS that you're putting a GT45 turbo on. You don't need to do that. Have you ever run a 470 big block Mopar on the dyno? I haven't. I haven't done. I've only ever run one big block Mopar, and it wasn't even mine. It belonged to Freiberger, and it was the 440, the motorhome, the RV motor. John Kazi does make 429 boss stuff, and it's very impressive. But I haven't run. I've run a couple of his different cylinder heads, but not a 429. Oh, Carrie, let's see. Basically, I want to give you a 6.1 Hemi. Could you make videos with it showing us how to make power boost with stock internals, boost, forged internals, torque build? I have a 6.1 block, and I think I have stroker assemblies for Hemis too that I haven't put together yet. But honestly, the Hemi stuff doesn't really seem to be that popular. People are not really watching those videos very much. Chevy has a Copo 572. Yep. Yeah, Mike, that's a good combination. A stock cam and a GT45 are good. Please speak to the cost effectiveness of money spent on a turbo versus heads cam and intake. I don't think there's any comparison there. I don't think you can get the power gains that you can with heads cam and intake that you can with a turbo. Are there any benefits to single overhead cam over double overhead cam? Traditionally, it's packaging for those. $228 Racing, if you ever have the spare time, okay, that's out. You should make a video of a 4.8 with upgraded bearings. Why do you need to upgrade the bearings? and fully studded with gap rings. All of the big bang motors have head studs and ring gap and MLS gaskets, and see how much power it can make with turbos rated at 2,000 horsepower. The turbos that we ran on the 6-liter were that already, the two S475s, but we won't get to you won't get to that level because the studs and stuff make no difference to that. That's not the weak link. The weak link on the stock bottom end with ring gap is the piston or the rod. That's what's going to break. I don't think you ever uploaded the HEMI header video. You alluded to it in the Junkyard HEMI video, but never put it up. Stock versus 2 different header sizes. I know that we ran HEMI header videos, or ran HEMI header tests. I'll have to go see. Maybe I didn't have the photos and stuff I needed for it. Sean, I designed turbo cams around torque rise, operating range, back pressure, and class rules were applicable. Sometimes it's better to consume to keep pressure ratio on the compressor side down to move more air mass. There are things that you can do to cam timing for what Sean's talking about, specific classes. Like if you're running, you have to run a class legal 75 millimeter turbo, let's say. So now you're trying to maximize everything that thing will do. So what they're doing is figuring out, am I getting to the flow limit? Because they're going to max the turbo out. They're going to spin as fast as it can, sometimes beyond that. They're going to do whatever that turbo can do. And then they're going to figure out ways to, okay, how can we make more power out of what's available there? So then you start looking at cam timing and go, can we bring our back pressure down? Can we get our response rate higher? Can we juggle a lot of things using cam timing that's going to make that particular thing that is ultimately whatever the maximum power level is? Can we have more average power? Can we have more launch? Can we get a better 60-foot time? Can we do a lot of things in specific classes? And that's when really good cam guys can help a lot. I am going to do the K24 stuff. I would like to run that at West Tech, actually, but I've been talking with the guys over at Skunk, who are great guys. I just would like to be able to run it the same way that we run everything else here. Have you ever tested GMPP small bore LS3 heads? I have not. I think the only small bore LS3 heads I've ever run are mass, and they work very well. Is there a rattlesnake near the camera? Can you hear that? One of the tuners here, Ish, has a K-swap Civic. That's the one that we did the video on with the turbo on it. Why do Pontiac engines seem to make so much power? I don't know what you mean. A 400-inch Pontiac makes the power that a 400-inch Chevy does. What point do 2.2-liter blocks pack it in? I don't know. I don't know what the block limit is. The block limit is usually higher than the internals. Yeah, the K-Series NSX that they did was really impressive. Yeah, Arc, it's a mild cam. I picked it because of the lift. I wasn't sure about the springs yet, and we had to order it so we could get it here right away. So the 212-218 seems like a fairly mild cam. It should work well. It's only 480 lift, so it should work good. Heavy SRT. You can take a look. Here are the HEMI boxes, so you can see. Yeah, it has, that's a Victor Jr. intake, I think, or what is it? What is the name of it? It is a Victor EFI Edelbrock intake manifold, and it, it's a shorter runner one, so it's going to want to run at a higher engine speed. But we'll see what happens. Yeah, Sean, I ran some of the cathedral port mass stuff with the big valves in them, and they did pretty well. How about testing the effective weight and the weight of the flywheel? I've done that already. We have, for Westech, we have both steel and aluminum flywheels and drive plates. So we compared those two, and there is a difference in power between those two. Thanks, Dr. Rock. The rattling sound is me moving my hands. How do you feel about the electric car movement? Do a test against the 6.1 intake. I don't have a 6.1 intake here. I don't have a stock one here. The one that I used for the video or for the tests I did for the book and all the magazine stuff way back belonged to somebody else. I just borrowed it. What about turbocharging a 366 tall deck? The motor doesn't care that it has boost on it. In any motor you can put boost on, including that tall deck. Unless I was putting something together that ran a lot of RPM, I would run the Magnum intake manifold over the 6.1. It's composite, you know, because of that heat soak. It's composite and it made more average power up until the very top of the RPM range. Why 5.7 and 6.1 HEMI builds and not so many 6.4s? Because I can't afford 6.4s. They're way more expensive. I can find 5.7s all the time, but I've never seen a 6.4 on the wrecking yard. And I already have one. So Matt, you did some did some night tuning. Nice. Carrie, I'll ship you a 6.1 intake. That video on that intake test is already up compared to the Magnum. I don't have it compared to this Edelbrock one. Pump E85 ended up about 63%. That's the thing. I think from about 50 on up, it's probably still as beneficial as it's going to be. You want to put a 408 Windsor and a C4 Corvette. I had guys come out to the Silver State with the oddest swaps I had seen. They were FE Tri-Power 390s. One of them had it in an El Camino, the other one had it in a Camaro, and the other one was, I want to say it was in some other Chevy. I'm thinking it was a Chevelle. Would still love to see a direct port water meth setup with dyno proof. I think that would work good for distribution. I still don't think water meth injection is going to do what an intercooler does, though. Joe, you're trying to set the quarter-mile world record for a stock K20Z3. I don't know. Is that like an established record? Yeah, the Magnum intake is this is an early one. This is an 06. Yeah, Julius, I agree. I got a lot of that here too when I was doing the 4-valve modular stuff and the Coyote stuff, and everyone's like, "Oh no, I can't. You know, I don't want to take those apart. I don't know where all those chains go. I don't know where all the cams are. I like you know when a piston's at top dead center, right? You know where the valves should be. The chains are marked. They have colored links on them. The sprockets have marks where those colored links go. All you have to do is just line it up. It's not magic. Heavy SRT, I got a 6.4 Hemi short block, very cheap with your name on it. That would be cool. I cannot have another. I need to get rid of the motors that I have. Magnum intake does not fit a 6.1 port. Yeah, we're not running the Magnum intake on the Edelbrock heads, which are a 6.1 port style, I think. We're only running the heads with the intake that came with it. I like guys going for records. I just don't, everybody, when they tell me that they're going for a record, it's like I'm going for the record of the white Grand Prix GTP with cloth interior and all these things. I'm like, look, I'm all for you wanting to go your car to go fast, but this world record thing, I don't understand what that description is. Water injections for detonation. Not to promote detonation, right? To help cure it. I had a discussion with somebody today telling me that, and what they really wanted is for me to tell them that the decision that they were obviously going to make before they asked me my opinion was the right one for them. They asked me if I had done any videos comparing intercooling to water meth injection. I said, yeah, I have a video up. We did a thing for Engine Masters. And then he said, well, I talked to the water meth guy, and the water meth guy said that I need to, he's going to do this water meth injection for me, which is fine. That's fantastic. I want you to do whatever you want to do. But said that you need to inject the water into the turbo. And then that will cure all of the distribution issues that are inherent in a long runner LS manifold. So after I got that response, I realized that I'm not having a discussion with somebody that wants my opinion at all. They just want to be told, yes, go do the thing that you're going to do, and that's fantastic. And injecting water meth into the turbo, I don't like that anyway, because I don't like putting liquid into the an impeller that might be spinning 100,000 RPM. I don't think it's good for the impeller. And honestly, I would have my doubts that it would improve distribution anyway. I know that the idea is to reduce the water droplet size and get a homogeneous mixture and have it all go in there, but it won't do that in a long runner LS intake manifold. It might help it compared to what we did. We weren't injecting it far enough away, although we tried different positions in the length of tubing that we had, and we tried different nozzles and different pressures and different onsets and all of that stuff. But even fuel, it's maybe not quite as bad, but water in suspension, when it goes in there and hits the intake manifold, it's going to come out of suspension. I'll water meth my T1 log 2.2. That's good. It's much better than not having it. Let's talk GM again and again and again. The Dodge 2.2, that's not GM, right? Wouldn't it turn the intercooler into a potential bomb? Well, if you were injecting the water meth into the turbo and you had an intercooler, that's a terrible idea, because it's definitely going to come out of suspension when it hits the side of the intercooler. That's not a good idea. In our instance, we didn't have an intercooler. We were comparing the water meth to intercooling. So when we had the water meth, we just had a discharge tube going from the turbo. We did not have any sort of intercooler on there. Iron Eagle raised deck dart block small block Chevy with symmetrical port 11-degree edge would be good in a Mustang. That all sounds very impressive. I don't know that I would be able to remember all of that to tell people what I have. Logan, early 5.7 blocks with later heads. Yeah, I would like to have the heads. So you can see my finger. I'm pointing over there toward the late model one. I'd like to have those heads on this one. Water meth has two benefits. One is octane and the other is cooling, depending on what your percentage is. Yep. I've seen water meth kit knock almost a full second off of a Grand National. Is the Grand National running on knock sensors then? Yeah, Rocket, the water meth injection and pre-turbo stuff was not a discussion on compressor efficiency, and it was we were talking about distribution in the manifold. This was all done in World War II water meth. Take a look at the intake manifolds that are on those World War II planes that ran water injection. They are not air-only LS long runner convoluted intake manifolds in those World War II aviation motors, I guarantee you. The stock K-Series long block world record with boost in the quarter mile is 962 at 155. There's a lot of guys that are running the 9-second zone with a stock K-Series. So it's a stock long block. Does it have ring gap in it? Is it like a stock bottom end thing? Is a small shot of nitrous good cooling for boosted? No, it's not. It doesn't work very well at all. We did a much bigger shot than that using nitrous as the intercooler, and we only dropped the temperature by about 25 or 30 degrees, if I remember right. There just isn't enough of it relative to the amount of heated air that you have from the turbo. So you have 800 horsepower worth of heated air from the turbo, and then you have 25, 50, 75, even 100 horsepower worth of nitrous going into that. Even though the nitrous is very cold, it just doesn't kill or cool the charge temperature very much. Dan R, thank you very much. Wartime emergency power, and they did have nitrous too, although the US didn't really rely on that nearly as much as the Germans did, and the British. Supposedly the 6.4 Hemi truck intake is better than the 5.7. That might be true, and I think that that's the case on the LS side too, or on the LT side as well. I think the L86 is a better intake manifold than the L83 is, but the dual runner 5.7 intake manifold seemed to work pretty well on the Hemi. Okie Speed, we'll take a look at the dyno results that I showed you, and you can see how much of a power gain you would possibly expect going from one exhaust manifold design to another. So unless the LA manifolds were really, really bad, because I don't think you're going to get much better on the 360 side than the ones that we tested on this Magnum. I keep asking Rich to do a poly engine, poly 318. That's probably not going to happen. They have run them here, but I've never run one. Are you going to try a high ram on a Hemi? Yeah, but I would need a Hemi that could take advantage of it. And the same thing with, don't they make a sniper version, like the fabricated sheet metal kind of thing? Nitrous was a good idea in aviation stuff because they were trying to improve the usable sealing for the plane, because you just run out of airflow basically. And so if you have cylinders full of all of the fancy oxygen molecules, you could have a higher elevation sealing. And also when somebody was chasing you and shooting at you, you could have more power to try to get away. Any more talks about the Tony David Vizard combo video? Yeah, I talked to David about that, and he likes it. I need to talk to Tony a little bit more about it. He was talking to me about something that he wants to put a 360 in, and I said, no, I don't. I'm not going to build this motor so you can put it in something that you want a free motor for. What I want is you to put it in a drag race car and run it at the drag strip. The high ram traditionally on the other applications work better than the Sniper does. You want to see a Hawker Tempest H24 Napier Sabre 3500 motor on a dyno? I don't think Westech will let me do that. I don't know if we have a cherry picker that would lift that up. You ever put long tubes on a Fox body? My Fox body had long tubes on it almost from the very beginning. I don't think I ever even had shorty headers on mine. And I just bought cheap. I think that they might have been Headmans or something. Yeah, Logan, that's typically what they do. The Sniper just kills all the low speed power. That's why these long runner ones, especially a dual runner one, is going to be really good. It's going to be kind of hard to beat. If the Sniper killed torque, advanced the cam timing, you can't change the intake manifold with cam timing. You can help it a little bit. How much more power do you see from opening the compression from 9.5 to 11.5? This is a 5.4 four valve. It's 3 to 4% per point, so you're looking at a gain of 6 to 8% in power from wherever you are now. 6% per point? No, that's too much. Have you looked into doing free valve technology? I was watching the Donut Media video tonight, or part of it today, on that they did on the free valve stuff. The Air Zoo in Kalamazoo, Michigan has an SR71. We have one of those out at a local place here too, and those are awesome. I got to go talk to SR71 pilots at some club up in LA that these guys were speaking. It was pretty cool because the guys from there were 2 original members from Easy Company that they did the film Band of Brothers on, and listening to these guys talk was just, you know, it's a once in a lifetime kind of deal. Yeah, Dan, I agree. We tell people it's 3 to 4%. And that's really only in the sweet spot. I think it's only from about 8 to 12. And then beyond that, the gains are less on either side of that. What would be an ideal air-fuel ratio for a street and occasional street trip vehicle, the Magnum? The air-fuel ratio at wide open throttle is not going to care whether you're on the street or you're on the strip. We run this one. The carbureted one is actually running, you know, anywhere from 11.5 to 12.5. It would run fine at wide open throttle. It doesn't seem to care too much about it. And we did the same thing on the EFI one. It wasn't real sensitive to air fuel ratio. So if you're at, like, if it's an NA one and you're at 12.0 or 12.2 or anywhere in that range, it's going to be fine. Cam timing will interplay with runner length. Yes, because it initiates the reflected wave, the opening point of the intake valve, but it also doesn't change runner length. And the reflected wave has to travel the length of the runner up and back before it arrives. So the cam timing can change the start-stop point of that reflected wave, but it can't change the length that it has to travel. With Magnum, will shorty headers, board, throttle body, and Edelbrock intake do much of anything? The intake is definitely going to do something. The shorty headers, probably nothing. A board throttle body, if the cam and the heads are still stock, is probably going to do very little. I know it's amazing that the SR71 was being designed back in the 50s. And maybe even a little before that, and was flying around way back then when guys did stuff with slide rules and stuff. It makes me wonder what they could make now. Dan, yeah, the A12, a lot of guys don't even know about that, the CIA plane. Sean, Richard, have you, and this will be the last question, I got to get going. Richard, have you observed that lower dynamic, static, or cylinder pressures tend to be more sensitive to airflow? Well, if you take a look at the Magnum, it has fairly low compression because it's factory. I don't know, maybe are you talking about 6-to-1 or 7-to-1 or 8-to-1 being more sensitive to that? A lot of the motors that we run on the dyno, like the LS stuff, is the same way. It doesn't seem to be real sensitive to, you know, like we run it we're at 11.8 on an NA motor, and we're like, oh yeah, there's gonna be a ton of power here now, and we go up to 12.5 or something, and it goes, yeah, here's like 6 or 8. I'm like, that's gonna be 25. And it never is that much. Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes we go from 11.8 to 12.2, and it says, I'm good. And they go up to 13.2, and it's like, I'm good. I'm using less fuel, but I'm still making the same power. And then we usually do get fairly good gains from timing, though. Make you intake manifold and make a forward-facing plenum, raise it by 1 inch, and picks up 20 horsepower on a stock engine. That wasn't directed at me, I don't think. So, okay, this will be the last one. So the major choke point for the EFI Magnum is more the valves than the intake or the headers. It's all of that. It has very, very mild stock cam timing. So it's not going to want to run at high RPM where it would be making horsepower. So if you shift the torque curve, even if it's making the same torque, if you do it at a higher engine speed, it makes more horsepower. That's the way math works. It has a really long runner intake that's designed to promote power production at lower engine speeds. We made peak power at 45 or 4600 RPM. It doesn't want to rev because the reflected wave is designed to arrive, you know, and be optimized to make peak power at 4500 RPM. So it has no cam lift, and more importantly, because the lift is all but insignificant, it has very little duration that would allow it to make RPM. It has a really long runner intake. And then the last thing is the cylinder head flow. The cylinder head flow is enough to support, you know, let's say we're making 300 horsepower. There's enough head flow to go to 400 horsepower. The manifold's not going to want to do that because it's not going to want to run at the RPM range where we can make 400 horsepower. Even if we put enough camshaft in it, where the camshaft wants to go to 400, the heads want to go to 400, but the intake manifold doesn't allow them to make power at the RPM where they need to make that power at. So it's basically everything that you have to change, but that's the way it is, you know. That's why they designed it that way. They wanted it all to work together because they're really pretty good at what they do. Okay, guys, thank you for showing up. I've got to get going. Got lots of work to do. I will be here tomorrow and have hopefully more data, because tomorrow I'm hoping to swap the cam in the Magnum and run it carbureted, put fuel injection on it, and then I'm waiting for some stuff on the Hemi as well, Lots of cool stuff. Non-stop testing. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later. Hey, and everybody hit the like button. I'm watching you.